This is such a weird watch. It is such a weird, kind of ugly, but amazing GMT. I am really excited about this Rolex. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with more Watches and Wonders content, and today we are looking at a couple of Rolex releases. Today we're talking about the new Oyster Perpetual watches, the new John Mayer, also being called the new Masters watch, and we're going to be talking about these GMT stone dials. What the heck are they? Has it ever been done before? Rolex says no, but there's a bit of debate about it. So all of my opinions on these watches are to follow. I guess let's go in that order. Let's start off with the Oyster Perpetual. Let me just start here. I love the Oyster Perpetual. Like, I really love the fact that it exists. I love that they make it in 36 millimeters. I love that it comes in other sizes too. I love that it's fun, that it's colorful. I love that Rolex has, with their Oyster Perpetual, their most democratic watch, right? The watch that is the entry point for Rolex, and yet no less Rolex than any other No less Rolex than any other Rolex, really. I mean, you are getting everything that there is to love about the brand at their entry point. That's awesome. You get to hold and feel the real weight. You get to understand why one would aspire to own one. You get now in the last couple of years, as they've had these colorful dials, they've been more experimental. You get the fun whimsy of the brand. Now, the fun whimsy of the brand is something that we shouldn't really pass over, and it's something that no one talks about. The fact that these watches are fun and whimsy, or rather, there is precedent in Rolex history for whimsical color and design. But that precedent does not exist at this price point. The most fun Rolexes that we can talk about, namely the big Stella dials, those Rolexes. In the day-date category, they also did a bunch of fun stuff with Gemset. They also did fun stuff with patterns. There was an entire Phillips auction about this stuff. They did stone dials in the Submariner, as an example. They did lapis Submariners, and they did onyx Submariners, both really rare and super expensive. These dials themselves sell for about $100,000, believe it or not. I mean, really think about that. A dial alone, right? A material that's only maybe worth $500 or $1,000 sells for $100,000 because of its significance, rarity, its place in history, and in the Rolex collecting world. That's really interesting. So there's precedent for this behavior. And yet, since 2020, when Rolex released the Oyster Perpetuals and all those fun colors, I actually have the green one, by the way, in 36, and I have my green day-date here as well, which is, again, fun, but this was in the 2014, 2012, around then. But again, all the way up in the higher end. But in 2020, when they did the colorful OPs, Rolex, I believe for the first time, basically said, let me take this youthful, exciting spirit and let me bring it to the entry level. Let me offer to the world something that is so beautiful about our brand, maybe one of the most beautiful things about our brand, at the most democratic price point. Now, again, the OPs are not cheap. These watches are still in the sixes. These are not cheap watches by any means. They're luxury watches. But for Rolexes, they actually are. I think the average sale price for a Rolex right now is like $14,000. So these are less than half, or around half of the cost, right? So now, a couple of years later, now we're 5 years into this colorful experiment, and Rolex is now releasing still colorful, beautiful colors, but not as bright. They've been dulled down. Still, whimsical, but not as obviously vibrant and in your face. I think this was a completely logical trajectory for this collection. It is still equally, enjoyable and beautiful and lighthearted. But long story short, I just love the colors. I love the lavender. I love what they did with the blue. I love the yellowish color. I think it's great. I still maybe prefer the really bright ones. I love my bright green. I love the Tiffany blue. I love all those watches. But these are just stunning. And this is really just a matter of personal taste, which color you're drawn to. But I don't think that the actual release of the color is anywhere nearly as interesting as the fact that Rolex even does this to begin with. I think that's so much fun.
Hello, my name is Sam Abaticola, and I'd like to say something. There is nowhere in the world, the whole wide world, that I would choose to buy my vintage watches from than Theo and Harry's shop. This is ridiculous. Which was founded by my best friend, Christian Alec Zeron. I say these words from the bottom of my heart, not because I was asked to or legally, as per my employment contract, obligated to. They have the best vintage Rolex, they have the best vintage Rolex and Pateks and Omega and a lot of other brands. They're the best to me, and they keep value in mind. They find cool, neat, interesting, and very often rare watches from those brands. And they find them in great conditions. They have great taste. I wish I had taste, but maybe I can because of the entire watch shop.
Thank you. Was that sincere?
No, I feel like I'm hostage.
It's because you are. Next point of the conversation, and I want to talk about, is the John Mayer, or the new John Mayer. The Rolex Daytona was released in 2016 in yellow gold with a green dial and in white gold with a blue dial. These watches were not trading above retail. In fact, in 2016, they were trading below retail. So we're talking about watches that at retail were about 40, and change, and that were selling in the mid-30s. They were always interesting, beautiful Daytonas. People just weren't looking at watches. I mean, the competition wasn't as stiff back then. People were not as aggressive. We weren't just as mad in their pursuit to acquire these pieces. And that mad pursuit is what led to this ridiculous, price increases, These ridiculous price increases. Of course, COVID had a lot to do with it, right? But that wasn't the only influential factor. John Mayer brought on those two watches, talking watches, a couple of years later, and he showed them off to Ben. And he talked about how great they were and how underappreciated, or whatever the hell he said, but showed them off. And that began the flurry. Those watches began to climb and climb and climb. The white gold with a blue dial, I believe, reached probably about $60,000, high 50s, mid 60s maybe, depending on condition or date of issue. But the John Mayer, the only one that actually got the title John Mayer, which is the yellow gold Daytona, only available on Oyster, bracelet with a green dial, reached over at one point $120,000, $130,000 in value. Now that is insane. I know people that paid $130,000, $120,000 for this watch. I know people that spend a lot of time thinking about, sweating about this watch. I also know people, very wealthy people with a ton of watches that weren't really wearing a ton of Rolex at the time, that began to wear Rolex again because of this watch. I also know a lot of people that really wanted the watch and were embarrassed to wear it because of the statement that it was sending to the world. This was the Rolex, kind of. I mean, basically, this was the one. If you could get one, apart from maybe the Rainbow Daytona, this was it. And they went up to $130,000. And now they're around $70,000. So they've been about halved in value. So dealers are probably paying people in the low 60s or even in the high 50s, and dealers are trying to flip in the high 60s or low 70s, again, depending on condition. And now the watch has been brought back with a slightly new dial configuration. And this conversation, that's all interesting. This portion of the conversation is fairly easy, and I want your opinion. Do you like what they've done with the dial? I don't think that I do. It's just my personal preference. I think that it looks very different in all different sorts of lighting. I have a problem, and I'd love your opinion on this. I have a problem when studio lighting and professional photography looks very different than how products look like when there's just a regular old photo. I understand that things are cleaner and things are a little bit more brilliant, but in studio photography, but they should still be kind of true. And I think that the Rolex studio photography looks very different than what I'm seeing on Instagram. I don't love that, to be fair. But I do like the watch. I just don't love it. And I was never in on the hype of the John Mayer Daytona. I never considered getting one. I have a lot of friends that would have killed someone for one, and I just wasn't one of those people. I instead got my white gold GMT, my COVID watch, my white gold, GMT with the black dial, which, I fell into the Rolex craze, but I just, I also didn't really have the budget of $130,000 to spend on a Daytona. That's just an insane amount of money for a $40,000 watch, or for a $38,000 watch. It's just a crazy amount of money. Anyway, I love it, though. Visually, the original, I thought it was just gorgeous. I thought it was great. Now, what could they have done in this later iteration, this new iteration, to improve upon that watch? Well, I'm not going to pretend as if I have the ego to say that I know the answer to this question, but I don't think it would have been so ridiculous if the Daytona, if this watch, took a page out of the playbook of the OPs. And instead of sticking with brilliant, went with equally interesting whimsical color, but duller, flatter. Could have been enamel, could have been a ceramic dial, which is happening in the GMTs right now for the first time. Could have been a stone. I'm not sure exactly, right? But I think that there was a more beautiful way, it was more beautiful, a different, a more refreshing, which would have been, if done well, like kind of shocking. We haven't seen a sort of, tasteful, kind of pastel Daytona in quite some time. And when we do, again, they're either stone and they're impossible to get. But if this watch was in the main collection and had a duller dial, like a duller green, a sea foam or something like that, I think it would have been really, really neat. The next two watches I want to talk about are really one and the same. They're both Rolex GMT Masters, one in rose gold with an oyster bracelet, and the other in yellow gold with a Jubilee bracelet. My first question, I'd love your thoughts on this. Which bracelet do you prefer? My GMT is on oyster, and I love it, but I will say the yellow gold Jubilee on the gold GMT, the yellow gold, is unbelievable. I think it's absolutely breathtaking. Anyone that owns this watch, even in the regular black dial, which is actually my preference over this stone, like has a home run watch. I saw that watch in an airport fairly recently, and I was like, oh my God, I have to have that watch. It's so beautiful. It would just be so redundant in my collection that I'd be a total idiot for getting it, at least for me, right? I have other interests other than just precious metal GMTs. There are other watches that I'd like to collect, like the Cartier Tanguy Hachet that I referenced in last week's video. So let's start with the basis. Again, a historical background. That's where I always start from. What are my historical thoughts? Well, number one, I love that Rolex is again reminding the world that they have always been a little weird and a little bit quirky and a little bit off the beaten path, kind of luxurious, kind of decadent. People forget that. Rolex is so, synonymous with a stainless steel Daytona or a stainless steel Submariner or a yellow gold, white dial or gold dial Day-Date. Those are all really sterile watches. Those are great watches and I love them all, but they're not nuts. They're not nuts. That's why when someone sees a Rainbow Daytona for the first time, they're like, what the fuck is that? That's not a Rolex. That's tacky. That's ridiculous. Some rich guy must have made them do that. No. Now, Rolex's tradition of bizarre usages of stone and gems, of which they use the utmost, the greatest quality, is this history runs very, very deep. In fact, the stone dials were, of course, made more popular in the Day-Date, particularly Day-Date, but also Datejust world. There was coral, of course, meteorite, lapis lazuli, malachite, tiger's eye, onyx. There were so many different stones that were used. There's a debate of whether or not opal was ever actually used. Some are out there, but we don't know if Rolex won't verify whether it was actually a real dial. We don't know, right? But there are so many interesting dials that Rolex had used. Now that tradition or that habit made its way, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, into the professional line. Rolex has made GMT Masters with meteorite dials, and I love the meteorite stone. I actually don't like it in the GMT, personal opinion. I know that many of you out there own that watch, and God bless you, wear it in health. I hope that you love it. It's not my cup of tea. I think that it's a little bit busy, but I love the way a meteorite dial looks on a white gold Day-Date with baguettes, if possible, if you may, if you can spare a couple, right? I think that looks unbelievable, fabulous, really. Now, what is this stone? This stone is something that seems to be new. Rolex is claiming that's new, called tiger iron. Now, I was speaking with Carl Cohen, who's a dealer friend of mine and a gemologist by trade. We actually had a full 45-minute discussion on our podcast community called The Zero. If you're not already a member of The Zero, go sign up for a free trial and listen to all this content that we've released this week. It's been really, really fabulous. We release episodes every week, and it's a really more of a unfettered, kind of candid conversation about the watch industry. We don't just talk about new releases. We talk about the industry itself, right? The rising and falling of different, media influencers and all that stuff. It's a really great place to be. Go take a look. I think you'll really enjoy it there. But we really did have this conversation. That wasn't just a plug. And he claimed, and I can't speak to this, but he claimed, and I trust Carl's integrity and I trust Carl's expertise almost blindly. He claimed that this tiger iron may be a somewhat renamed, a new name for a stone that Rolex has used before in their Day-Date category, or the Day-Date collection, rather. Now, it's possible that it's probably true that's real, that did happen. But I think it's likely, as Carl and I discussed, that it could be the same family of stone, but maybe a different cut, in the same way that Rolex has always used onyx, but perfect black onyx rather, and now they use black onyx with lines in it, for lack of a better word, right, with patterns in it, which is also completely natural. So you're just picking a different part of the stone. It's kind of interesting, right? The same way that no two tiger's eye are the same, or no two lapis are the same, right? I think all of that is really interesting. So yes, there's a deep history, there's deep precedent, which I think is my favorite word here when it comes to Rolex. There's so much precedent for watches like this. My personal opinion, I actually don't love these dials, to be totally honest with you. I don't love them. I don't think that these dials, maybe I prefer the rose gold over the yellow, but in the yellow gold case, I actually think the regular without stone is far more beautiful. I think the yellow gold GMT, which is the regular old black dial, is far more beautiful than this new variation. But in rose gold, I'm not actually the biggest fan of the root beer full gold GMT. So maybe this extra spice is fun and interesting. But that's it. Those are my thoughts on these first 3 releases. We're going to be doing another video, probably another 2 videos on Rolex. We're talking about Tudor, Cartier, IWC, so many other brands right here on Theo and Harris. So like this video. If you liked it, please comment down below. I'm reading so many of your comments I did last week. And subscribe to our channel if you're here for more watch content. There is a ton more coming. We'll see you all soon. Thanks for tuning in.
Watches, particularly vintage watches, represent this intersection of history, of design, of engineering. Theo and Harris is a family business. It always has been. And that's because we, my family, all share a passion for this remarkable intersection. For nearly a decade now, we have scoured the world from Oklahoma to Tokyo for some of the most interesting watches by some of the world's most revered manufacturers to share with our community. We handpick our collection. We look for quality and we look for taste. We choose watches that, for one reason or another, speak to us. We authenticate them, we service them so they're ready for decades of memories to come, and then we share them here with you. We support our clients. We believe in expedited and fully insured shipping so they never have to wait. We believe in stress-free returns in the off chance they change their mind. We believe in building relationships that last. Theo and Harris is a family business. And we haven't just built a shop, we've built a community. So whether you're considering adding a vintage watch to your collection, a handmade strap to your life, or if you're just looking to talk watches, we're grateful that you've chosen us.